about 6 months ago, RadReads.co got hacked. So you have to like create the right kind of environments for it to come up. And when it comes up, you got to be ready to pounce, and not pounce from a place of scarcity, but pounce like just like get the thing done. So I'm very action oriented in that regards. Like when it's time to pounce, I'm ready to pounce. Like you said, many of these pillars to your language that I've discovered the learning pillar. I've discovered the spirituality pillar. I've discovered the fitness pillar. I don't know what the other pillars are. And I just feel really blessed that they've made my life much richer. You're like, oh, wow, if I change these like 3 sentences, my sales go up. It's really wild how fast the feedback loop is on copywriting, especially in the digital world. It's slower in the physical world.
Welcome to the Polymath Polycast, highlighting your multidisciplinary life, showcasing that it's okay to do many different things. Hello, I'm Dustin PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Kay. He is the founder of RadReads, although that name is going to be changing here soon, known as the Oprah for Millennials, super connector, host of the Examine Life podcast, writer, YouTuber, and overall coach for high performance individuals. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I have followed along with you for a long time. I was using Notion for half a decade, so obviously you came into my radar pretty early on, but it's one of those things where just using knowledge management is just so important for people who are like us, doing many different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, you're right. My early Notion days was, it was funny because I was recording Loom videos, answering people's Notion questions on Twitter. This was before the pandemic, so 2019. How I got roped in, that's how I got into that world of Notion. I don't spend that much time in it anymore. And before that, I'm 45 years old, so I've been a GTD, David Allen, getting things done aficionado since I graduated from college in 2001 when I bought the book, I think in 2003. And so that has been a mainstay of my productivity system for 21 years.
It's interesting too. What did you use before Notion?
But before Notion, it was all fragmented, right? So I used OmniFocus to do my to-do list. And I actually still use that. I had a little phase when I tried to use Notion for tasks. And I was using a mix of Evernote and Google Docs. Yeah. And then when I was trying to do some database stuff, I was using Airtable or Excel, Google Sheets. And then I've used drafts a lot. I really like using drafts. I'm kind of like the mid-twit meme. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where I'm kind of going back a simplified route where I basically use Notion. I just have one table with all my documents and like a few tags, and then which I barely even use. And then I use drafts for notes, and then I use OmniFocus for tasks.
Notion is definitely not that great with tasks either, so I understand that. I always had a hard time with that. I'm actually moved to Obsidian myself because I wanted everything local. I had a lot of issues with AWS going down, and or Notion being kind of finicky, and I was like, let's just go local on the computer.
Yeah.
So over the course of your life, I know that on all these different podcasts, you've talked about your time at BlackRock, you talk about your time with RadReads. I'm curious to see, what was your mindset 5 years ago and how have you changed since then, just in the last 5 years? So
if we rewind the clock 5 years, that would be right before the start of COVID. And so I would have been, I think of my career, so like I said, I'm 45 years old. I think of my career in a few different chapters. From 21 to 35, I worked a traditional corporate career. At 35, I kind of became an accidental entrepreneur, an online creative, and so on. And so 5 years later, in 2019, I was kind of getting my sea legs as an internet creator. I think I probably had like 30,000, 40,000 email subscribers. I was pretty active on social media. I was doing the Notion thing. And so in 2019, I was and that was before COVID, getting ready to kind of go into the info products world. And so I had a course that was called Supercharge Your Productivity. It was initially called Supercharge Your Productivity with Notion. So it was a Notion course for the first few cohorts. And then we dropped the Notion part and made it more of an overall kind of workflow, principle-based workflow system. And that was something that I grew pretty aggressively. It did, COVID was a godsend from an economic environment for those types of products. And then COVID was the end of COVID, which was welcome in my everyday life, was hell for info products. And that business really struggled this was in 2020, 2022. And so then I, made the painful decision of kind of shutting it down and went back to being much more of a one man band creative.
That's very interesting because I definitely know that you've hired people, you've had to fire people, you've had to go back and forth depending on the fluctuations in the market. And as a creator, I really loved how I was listening on the interview. You talked about you had the income already taken care of from all your previous endeavors. So when you first started creating, you were able to just dive right into it and really like get your creative juices going and seeing what you can do. And actually, I just left the comment on the video I was watching before this. You love doing like those 3,000 word blog posts, and like I do too. Just being able to have that like flow of thoughts and really get all that information out. I love doing that even more than doing the marketing as well. So I get that.
Totally. Yeah. I'm much more of a creative person at heart. I think I fell into this trap or, blessing, curse, however you want to, paradox, maybe we'll call it, where I was pretty good at digital marketing and specifically copywriting, self-trained. I mean, I got coached by a gentleman named Billy Bross, but mostly self-trained in copywriting. And then, when you're selling info products and you are practicing copywriting all the time, you're like, oh, wow, if I change these like 3 sentences, my sales go up. It's really wild how fast the feedback loop is on copywriting, especially in the digital world. It's slower in the physical world. And I think I got, when you are good at something and when that skill leads you to more money or more whatever, fame or notoriety, can be very addictive. But then you got to remember, you're like, I don't really like this thing. And that was I put the result, getting seen, getting paid ahead of the process, which was like doing the thing. And then I realized later, I was like, I still use copywriting a lot. I have like a very sharp eye for copywriting, I think. But I don't want to like build businesses that are like centered around doing that all the time.
You don't want to put all your energy into that. It kind of reminds me too, like, did you feel that way when you were making websites in the late 90s too? Did it kind of feel like it was just tedious almost at a point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I was so young that I was just happy to be making cash.
Yeah.
Like without a boss, under the table. So, cash, could I have done that for many more years? No. But I think I started making websites when I was 17. So I was looking at the other day, I made my first website when I was 17 and it was a travel agency and the guy had all the hotels. It was like this like giant Word document of hotels on like 17 floppy disk drives, like 3.5-inch floppy drives. And he gave me the floppy disk and he's like, turn this into a website. And I was making, I think like $17 an hour, $20 an hour. And so I think it took me 100 hours. And so I made $2,000, in 1996, which is, I think I did the math. That's like $3,700 today, and then kept it all. And so I was on cloud 9.
Yeah.
Bought some Jordans.
You have to invest in yourself in the future too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of websites, how did RadReads start?
Yeah. When I was working in corporate and on Wall Street, I was always tinkering with things digitally. This was back in the days where the media policies were very strict. People still thought LinkedIn wasn't even a social network back then in 2015. It was just an about.me page, right? So I was always tinkering with things. I had an anonymous culture blog where I would write about concerts and new albums and things like that. I love music. I love writing. I was tweeting a lot anonymously. Also, I was organizing secret networking events in New York City, in-person networking events, like these kind of like Jeffersonian dinners. And then RadReads came about I was on vacation, so I had a lot of free time, and I was very active on Twitter, more as a consumer in 2015. But I saw all these cool articles. This is when you could share links on Twitter. So I saw all these cool articles and I just I packaged them together in an email and I just sent them to 36 friends. I'm like, hey, these are some neat articles. I like article 1 because of this. I like article 2 because of this. Very, very simple. And people were like, this is amazing, right? Because they weren't on Twitter. They didn't have that kind of curation bug obsession that I have to like always find like the best, article in the weeds and all that. And so that was the first one. And I always remember that in that first email, it was a Gmail BCC though, like it wasn't even on a ESP email service provider. I wrote in the PS, I don't know when I'll have the time to do this again. And I'm just working on the 473rd issue for this coming Saturday.
That's crazy. I definitely understand that drive though, because I love tools like content repurposing tools, knowledge management tools. Tool Finder is a great resource, and I always support the Keep Productive team. But there was tools that they didn't even have on their site, and I'm like, hey, like I want a place where everyone can find all the knowledge management tools, let alone the content repurposing tools. And so, while I didn't do emails, I made a website directory of all the different tools I found. And like, just because I was obsessed with it, and I was like, I keep giving people links to my Airtable. Like, they don't want to see that. They want to see it visually. So I get it. It's just nice to see someone else who is like nerdy about some similar things. Like, here's a cool link. What's the story behind the name? Because you like the word rad, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good alliteration, right? Barry's Boot Camp, Jamba Juice, Best Buy, kind of known that they were, that was, I think I intuited that was kind of a smart way to approach branding. I grew up in New York City. I was living in New York City at the time, but I was a kid of the 90s that really appreciated like skate culture, Thrasher magazine. I skated a lot. I like streetwear. And so I was just like, and rad is like cool as like 3 letters, And so I was just like, I want to have the word rad in. I said rad a lot, even though it wasn't like a very common thing to say, particularly not in the East Coast. And I was like, well, RadReads and radreads.co. Actually, .com wasn't even available as a domain, so radreads.co. And, we were a curated email and newsletter, so made a lot of sense. I will say, it's hard to know these things, but I will say that the word rad started to get used a little bit more, like over the past decade. And so I'd like to think I had like a little bit of an influence in that.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And that was, like I said, I bought that domain 10 years ago.
I definitely think .com is overrated in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I just bought KE.com for $1,500, like, cause I wanted the .com. Well,
also too, considering like where you're at, it makes sense too.
Yeah.
And is that where you're going to fully rebrand to? Is this KE.com?
I don't know. It's a good question. So this would it make sense for me to tell you like a little story about what happened with the name change? So about 6 months ago, RadReads.co got hacked by it seemed like Indonesian porn gambling company, something like that. I did the classic thing. I was like very sloppy and updating my WordPress plugins and like all that. And someone hacked us. They hacked us and then we got them out. I paid some friends helped me, but then Google had blacklisted our site. And it's a funny thing because I had spent a lot of time doing SEO content. And we owned SEO for Notion for a long time. We didn't own it, but we were really competitive in GTD. We had really good backlinks, because my story got covered by Wall Street Journal and a bunch of different publications. So we had backlinks from basically all the major publications. And so, we were just it was a great SEO thing. However, a few things happened. One, I don't write about Notion anymore or even GTD. So even if you find me for that, we're not the right fit anymore, right? So it kind of was besides the point. It wasn't that powerful. And then the other thing was ChatGPT, right? So even if people are looking I don't follow the difference between AI queries and Google searches, but I would imagine that every website's just seen traffic plummet because people I haven't used Google in months. So then I was well, it doesn't really matter anyway that we're being penalized by Google. The only thing I want is if someone looks up my name, I want them to know a little bit I want to control what they see, right? So I was every year or so I check KE.com. And it's always been taken. I think it's some acronym, Kevin, Henry, Edwards, Young, Herman and Young, some law firm or something like that. And then this time I checked it and it was available for $1,500. And I'm a pretty frugal guy. I could have bought the .me or the .io for $20, but I'm 45 years old. I've worked hard for my money. I'm that I deserve to treat myself. And this is it felt like a nice transition point. I'm thinking of writing a book. I'm in the process of writing a book. And so you could make the argument that my next kind of a homepage could be the name of the book. but I don't have the name for the book. So, and I might not have a name for a book for another 6 or 7 months. And even then I'm like, well, it's still good for me to own my name.
Yeah.
Right. Even if I just throw an about me.page, where it's just like one pager, like here's who I am. That's still that's a win. So that's the story. So I'm feeling pretty psyched about it. It took me until age 45 to own my own name.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Is like my interest in things change, right? I was all in Notion 5 years ago, and I just don't care anymore. I don't dislike it. It's just I'm not interested in talking about it or writing about it. And so, at one point I owned Notion.courses. I had a productivity framework called 10K Work. And so we owned all the SEO for 10K Work for a while. But the thing I realized about myself is they're like fads to me. I get really into it and I'll write about it and create content about it, but then I move on. That's like life, And so, but what's the thing that's never going to change is my name. So I'm actually super psyched about it now.
I'm super psyched for you. And actually what you just said there is perfectly fitting for this show because people who are generalists and polymathic, they do have difference and changes, their curiosity shifts. And the way I like to describe it in the knowledge management sense is that you have these phases. And within the phases, you have your projects, goals, and tasks. And your phases are your areas of discipline or expertise. And so your Notion phase is over now. And while it might have lasted a longer than you expected, it's just like you've done with that, you kind of close it off. And maybe 10 years down the line, Notion explodes again and you go back to it. Or maybe you just completely, for the rest of your life, no longer make content around it.
Totally.
I also want to mention too, even though I just said that .coms are overrated, I do think that the move that you made there was actually a really great idea. And I definitely love the fact that you got your name finally.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, it's like staying at a nice hotel. I could stay at a .co, but I kind of want to stay at a nice hotel, and I could make that purchase today.
Yeah, and I actually,
if it was $5,000, I wouldn't have bought it. I think 1,500 was the upper end of what I would have paid.
I'm a frugal person too, and even I'm 1,500 seems reasonable considering what it is. I definitely understand the pain of using WordPress. I used .com and .org over the years. I moved over to Ghost now. I tried Substack. I tried Beehive and Paragraph. And so I'm kind of curious because I know you messed around with Creators Corner on Substack. So you played around with that. You played around with WordPress. What sort of things are you looking for in the tool you're writing? Are you going to Ghost? Are you kind of thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know. I've taken a break from blogging because I really don't think that there's a natural home for medium form writing anymore. Right. And so it's kind of sad, but there's no discovery for if you're going to write a 500-word essay on your blog, who the heck's going to read it? You can't even drop the link on a social network. So what I find that I end up doing is let's say I want to write a 500-word essay. What I would do is I would make a carousel on Instagram. I hate those so much. Yeah. I think they're so corny. It's the worst way to read. But guess what? My readers, that's where they are.
And you posted on the threads, didn't you?
I did for a while. I don't really like the meta ecosystem. It doesn't really excite me that much. So that's a bummer. I sometimes distill them and make them more LinkedIn broetry and put them on LinkedIn, but it's kind of you can't even format paragraphs and stuff. Yeah. So I just don't think that there's a natural home for it. So I'm not and I don't really have the appetite to write every week anymore. So I don't know. I'm playing with Framer right now. It's kind of like fun, cool toy. Maybe Webflow, but I heard some kind of bad things. I don't think Webflow would be the way I want it to go. I think though that a blog will be secondary, and so I don't need a super juiced up CMS. I just need it to work and look nice. I think the where I'm at in this phase with khe.com, because it is my name, I really want it to look nice. I want it to capture who I am, and so I might actually spend some time on a design vision and real money and time to really be I did I was kind of querying ChatGPT as a creative director for a web project. And it was just the first point is well, why, what do you want people to get from your site? Which it wasn't something I ever really thought about. Right. And I'm well, chances are they don't know me when they come, and I want them to recognize that I want them to get my vibe. I want them to know that I'm a, real, like legit person, so like a lot of like social proof. And I want them to go down different rabbit holes of like information. And so that's more the way I'm thinking about it. So instead of even blogging regularly, I was thinking of just having what I'm calling them guides. So I might have a guide on like like money psychology, and that might be like a 5,000 word kind of like mini book type ebook type thing that lives there, that like
like a
people with like
Blockbuster
lots
post.
of, yeah, exactly. Like what do they call them? They used to have a
Pillar.
pillar post, yeah.
Yeah.
But not with like a SEO in mind.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was just super excited about it. This is like catnip for me because I love talking tools and CMS. And actually, I just released that PolyTools website not that long ago, and I built it I tried to use like Notion or Airtable to website converters. Those didn't really quite look good enough, but they were kind of functional. Then I tried Framer, and I bought a 3-month Framer, and I put a whole bunch of hours into it, and it was slow, could not get it fast, and the CMS was super frustrating to me. I don't know if it's because I'm very like needy with CMSs. Like you said, you don't really need one because you're just doing basic posts, but I just think it's like I couldn't get multiple. You couldn't do more than one tag, for example. I want to have 2 tags for some things, and it was also very clunky in the back end. But yeah, so I made the new site in Ghost, and I actually remade my personal brand site. What you just said there too, like what you want the experience to be like. You want to go down these different rabbit holes. I love that, especially since you have a lot of different rabbit holes to offer.
Yeah. So are you happy with Ghost so far?
Yeah, so I've been on Ghost since like 2019 for my main site, and the biggest thing for me, is that I hated how in WordPress I was constantly updating plugins, constantly fixing the site, and it prevented me from getting into the flow of writing. And with Ghost, I've never had to really fix any real problems.
Got it.
I think Cloudflare messed up on me once, but that was about it.
And is the design, like, do you have some flexibility to make like really pretty pages and stuff?
If you have coding experience, I think that helps a lot. Unlike WordPress, you can't have this drag and drop kind of thing, which is what I'm used to. I never really was able to pick up coding very well. You have a history with it, so I'm sure you'd be fine. But even I picked up a little bit of JavaScript that they use to like move things around, stuff like that.
Got it. Cool. Good to know. I might have to look into that.
Yeah. I definitely... I looked up, Lewis Howes, Gary Vee, even Oprah at one point. I looked at their personal brand website and I thought about the flow of it. What do they have in the hero section? What do they have in the next section? And I made a little database comparing each one. I was curious to see like how it flowed and try to model off of that.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. I do that a lot too.
Yeah.
I just take notes or like make notes and mental notes but I did the exact same thing like a few days ago.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. Like Jay Shetty and things like that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I know that they have different reasons. Like they might want to market their podcast or their book, and they have a more singular focus, especially when it comes to SEO or even copywriting. They're trying to narrow it down. They always say like go niche down. For people like us, though, we're more multidisciplinary. It's hard for us to do that. Maybe our current focus could be the niche, but it's kind of hard. I wanted to have my videos, podcasts, and blog posts all to be there so people can see all of them. And it kind of messed me up a little bit. I was going to ask, given the fact that you have all these different things going on, how do you manage this multidisciplinary life?
I would say there's kind of 3 ways that I go about it. One is I have a very, very simple rule. And the rule is, does it make me come alive? And so like if something is like pulling my direction towards aliveness, fun, vibes, like however you want to describe it, that is like the forcing function. So right now I'm like I've been learning to make electronic music. And like there's no end game. Like I'm not trying to become a producer. I'm not trying to get a record deal. I'm not trying to do a show, nothing. Just I want to learn how to do it. And that's like calling me right now. And so I've been spending more of my time making electronic music. So following the liveness, that's what led me to writing a memoir. And so like, that's what I want to write right now. So follow the aliveness is the first principle. The second one is I use a lot of habits and rituals. So I have 2 kids. They're relatively young, 10 and 7. So my days are very similar in the sense, my kids wake up at the same time, they go to school at the same time, they eat dinner at the same time. And so I kind of work backwards from there, right? And the other thing is I surf. And so surfing was a big part of my life. And surfing is kind of, it's 8 a.m. to 11, like you can't schedule it. But in general, it works between 8 and 11. So So the way I manage things is I leave my 8 to 11 for surfing, but I have, like I said, I have a lot of habits and rituals. So I wake up first thing in the morning, I meditate. I don't turn my phone on until my kids go to school. I'll take my creatine. I'll do like, my different, supplements and things like that. Then I'll go surf. After I surf, I'll go write for a couple hours. Then like in the middle of the day, I do like more of my coaching, things that like social media stuff, things that require like a little less brain power. Well, coaching requires a lot of brain power, but they're more like less like deep work. And then as the day starts to wind down, then it's like, is it time to make music? Is it time to read? Is it time to just chill? And then my kids get home from school, dinner time and all that. It's like back, getting them through the end of the day, getting them ready for the next day. So it's pretty, yeah. So it's pretty simple in that regards. And then the third thing is I like to give myself a lot of space. And so I really do believe that, if you're going to really lean into your creative work, you have to kind of be ready to creative work can't be scheduled. So you have to like create the right kind of environments for it to come up. And when it comes up, you got to be ready to pounce, and not pounce from a place of scarcity, but pounce like just like get the thing done. So I'm very action oriented in that regards. Like when it's time to pounce, I'm ready to pounce.
And that definitely, I bet, gets you into flow a lot more often too.
I think so. I mean, it also helps that I work for myself. I don't have any direct reports. I have a handful of contractors, but I've architected my firm, my life to make it very spacious.
I love that because I definitely got the same mindset when it came to writing, where it's like I want to schedule like 10 a.m. is my circadian rhythm high point of the day. I want to try to write at that time, but sometimes I don't want to write. I don't have the ideas. The ideas are not coming. And then all of a sudden at midnight, I'm like, oh, I need to write this down. I don't remember who it was. It was not Albert Einstein, but someone pretty famous would like sit there with a like string around his head and a bell and would wait till he fell asleep to get into that like alpha wave state, and the bell would ring and wake him back up so he could write down whatever ideas he was having.
Oh wow, that's intense. I'm like the opposite of that. I'm like, if it's time to sleep, like go the F to sleep.
It wasn't like keeping himself awake. He was just trying to hack into that alpha wave creative mind flow. But it's just interesting because I think you have that natural vibe of just kind of go with the flow. And that's really fun. And especially since you've been able to take that go with the flow, but still also be productive on top of that. And people kind of take that mindset like, oh, you're going like a wave, but then you're going to crash. Like, no, I have stability, so I'm fine.
Yeah. And it is this like, I think it's just the way that works for me, but I think the difference is like, I'm very action oriented. So like where I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn music. And now I try to make a song every week.
And that's K Boogie, right?
Yeah. That's my SoundCloud. And so that's like a lot of people, and I used to be in this camp for a while, where like, they just talk about the fact that they're going to make music, or they watch a lot of YouTube videos about making music, right?
They never do.
And then they never do it. And because guess what? You can watch 10 hours, you could watch 1,000 hours of videos on YouTube on how to make music and feel like and I feel like I have really sidestepped that, which is I'm very action oriented. And so like I'm very precise in that's why, I was blogging, medium form blogging, 500 words a week for like 400 consecutive weeks. And like, this doesn't feel alive for me anymore. It feels like a chore. And so I just, with very little hesitation, I'm just like, it's over, cutting it off.
It's interesting, especially since like you didn't let the emotional, sentimental attachment to it kind of keep you to keep doing it. You're like, no, it's time to be done.
Yeah.
At least now.
I do think though that's the result of a lot of therapy, like being attached to things, or being scared to being scared. If you're scared to shut something down that's not serving you, that's an invitation to go inwards further, right? Like you might, there's all the different behavioral biases, like sunk cost fallacy, or there's like the identity, like I'm K from RadReads. Like, who am I if I'm no longer K from RadReads? I'm just K from K. Even when I got in, right, I was going to put founder and see, like I used to write founder of RadReads, but instead I'm like, well, I don't really attach to that identity anymore. I'm like, what do I write here instead? And so I ended up writing writer and coach.
Did that really impact you, or did you feel like you just transitioned? Because I know that some people, they really freak out when they don't have that identity anymore.
I had It didn't impact me much, but I had 10 years of practice. It
Mm-hmm.
really impacted me when I left corporate America, because then people think you're crazy. Like,
Yeah.
if to leave at, like, I was a pretty, quote unquote successful guy like in that phase of my life. Like, most people don't leave that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when the identity, I call it the identity earthquake. That's when it really was, that it really hit hard.
But you
But
felt in your gut it was the
that
right
was 10
thing.
years ago.
If you felt that was the right thing.
Yeah, that was absolutely the right thing. Absolutely the right thing. Yeah. It wasn't easy though. I mean, again, financially, I took a huge pay cut. My identity got demolished. Everyone around me was
Mm.
like, what is wrong with, why would you leave this? Like, it was literally like like on paper, it was a dream job in the sense of it was very high status and very high earning. And I was very young when I left. I was 35. So it was the right thing for me.
It's interesting to think about too. You talked about introspection and meditating either on this call and other calls too. I talk about the four pillars: the mind, body, spirit, and emotions. And
Hmm.
obviously, you take care of your body. You have a six pack. You're super fit. So you take care of your body pillar very well. You focus on learning quite a lot as well, and you've always seemed to have a good organization for that. But what I find really interesting is how much you've developed your spirit pillar and how much you've gone into that. Because it doesn't have to even do with religion. It's like just having that conscious and
I'm not
subconscious mind.
religious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. And I don't think I didn't have that 10 years ago. So this is new. I feel very fortunate. I'm definitely, I follow more like Buddhist and
Mm-hmm.
Eastern teachers, but I don't identify as a Buddhist. And I've just had amazing spiritual teachers, anything from like meditation teachers to like, I worked with a practical philosopher for many years, and we would just philosophize on like the self and like, like death and
Mm.
mortality and things like that. I'm in some men's groups where we talk about these types of questions. And honestly, like a lot of I've also experienced, in the last decade, I've lost four people have passed who are very close to me. Two of the four prematurely, in their
Mm-hmm.
30s, 40s. So, I've experienced loss, I've experienced grief. Grief, I think, is definitely one of the, if you're willing to explore your grief, I think in the West in general, people try to shut down their grief. They're like, oh, I'm just going to get back to work or just have a few drinks to, not feel this sad. I feel very lucky. My wife, it was her father, so we were grieving together. And so that was an interesting avenue, for spirituality, and meditation has been a huge invitation for spirituality.
It's definitely a very good skill that I think most people could benefit from. I empathize with that too, Kay, because I had a mentor, late mentor, who from a young age had guided me in a lot of ways. And he died, I think, around 38, 39, super young. And it was just
Sorry for your
prematurely.
loss.
Thank you. Yours as well. And it's just one of those things where being able to handle that and not ignore that grief and just,
Hmm.
it's going to hit you at random times. There was one song that came out, and when I listened to it, it just immediately reminded me of him, put me straight into that
Yeah.
mode. And it's interesting about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to process it. Well, I guess moving on here, because let's make it back into happy things.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned earlier is this lack of a place for medium kind of blog posts or medium written
Yeah.
posts. And I kind of call them social blogs because
Hmm.
medium.com or LinkedIn articles were kind of the social network of blogging.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like you said, there's no home for them anymore.
Hmm.
And I tried using Substack as a home for it. I tried using LinkedIn, didn't really work. And so,
Yeah.
what are you thinking you're going to do down the line? Like, you're just going to leave it there? Are you going to maybe combine them all into a small book? What do you think might be
Yeah.
interesting?
It's a good question. It's such a shame. Yeah. It's definitely not LinkedIn because people are there for the
Yeah.
quick broetry fix. And I thought Substack would have a chance, and I like reading Substacks, and I
Yeah.
subscribe to a lot of Substacks. But first of all, I hate that it always pulls me into the app. It's like a
Hmm.
very negative experience as a reader. There's a lot of things that I end up not reading because it's trying so hard to pull me into the app, especially on mobile. I've never once commented on a Substack, and I really have no interest. Like, sometimes I'll scan the comments, but I just have really no interest in like reading
Yeah.
the
That's cool.
Substack comments. And the reading experience is pretty good, but it's not like well organized either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can't like go down a rabbit hole on Substack, because in some way I think there's a challenge, because Substack is, the newsletter, if the newsletter is the form, in the reader's mind it's still kind of discardable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like people would always ask for, RadReads episode from like 7 weeks ago. I'm like, why do you want to, like, it's old news, man? Like, just
Yeah.
why don't you just read the new
Move
one,
on.
right? So I don't know where that where that home is. I do think that, you know what? I think it still lives on the personal blog, but here's the challenge is like, you got to get people to your personal blog, right? And so I think that the way I see it is the bar is so much higher, right? But the people want to go there. So for example, like I'm pretty active on TikTok, and I get one or two LinkedIn requests a day, and it's people from TikTok. And I don't even put my LinkedIn on my TikTok. So something I said is compelling enough to that person to, like, find my LinkedIn, want to connect via LinkedIn. And this is because on TikTok I do a lot of like professional content. So I think that, but then like they want it, they want to connect badly. So they're willing to go through all those steps to just land on my LinkedIn. So I would imagine that people would take the same trajectory to land on a home where you write.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the blog is dead per se. I think that the way people find it is much different, and the volume of readers is going to be much lower, especially if you're writing in a niche topic. So I think it's more like a recalibration of expectations to some regards. It's like, are you willing to spend an hour writing something which might only get viewed a couple hundred times, right? Like, is that a good use of your time? Or would you rather write 50 tweets, like, and get like more people to like pay attention to you, but maybe they don't go deeper? I don't know the answer to that.
And it's not even so much opportunity cost either. It's just more like, what do you feel like is the right thing to do, and what is the right thing to do for your niche too?
I think it is opportunity cost in some regards, because your time is finite. So, let's say you have, as a writer, I know that I can't write for more than 3 hours a day. And so if I'm going to write a book for 2 hours a day, I have 1 hour of writing left. That's why I stopped the blog. I'm like, I can't even go and write a blog that, I don't know how many people are going to read. And so I actually personally took that hour and invested it in vertical video and TikTok. And it's like, it's not writing, it's a different skill. I'm kind of like, I like TikTok. I like what's happening there.
It's fun. Yeah.
It's not getting banned. It doesn't look like it's getting banned anymore. So that's off the table. But I think it's a cool, for me, Dustin, what I look for in social media is, where are people having real conversations? It's definitely not on Twitter anymore. And so actually there's a little bit on LinkedIn. I just don't like LinkedIn. I think it's like having a party at in a conference room. Like, why would you want to, like, I don't want to go to the happy hour in the conference room. I want to go to the happy hour at the bar. Right. So TikTok, we'll see. I mean, jury's still out. I'm quite old for there. My followers are younger there, but I've made some very, very interesting connections on TikTok.
I've been on there since 2018, and so I get what you're saying. Back when it was Musical.ly, even I've seen people get married on TikTok, like a few different couples even, and I've seen people blow up on TikTok. I've seen people like yourself kind of find a home, and having that vertical video. Like, I post all these clips to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube. Now I'm going to also do LinkedIn too. Now that they're doing it, even Spotify has clips now. So like, vertical video is just exploding more and more. Yeah, but TikTok has such a vibe that's unique compared to all these other platforms.
It really does. And I'll tell you, on my TikToks, they're one takes, no editing, very mediocre audio, and some of them do like I have one that, like, I have a few that have like 70,000 views, and like the lighting's garbage, and like I'm like not shaved, or like I look like an oaf, but the content was good and people resonated with it.
One of the funniest things I always kept hearing from tons and tons of creators across the spectrum was like, they'll spend 2 hours on a 30-second video only for it to flop, get like 200 views. Then they spend 30 seconds on a 30-second video and it goes viral.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what do you feel like you want to create when it comes down the line? Because I know that this isn't a show about content creation. I definitely would like to have you on that one too, because it's fun to talk about that kind of stuff. But what kind of video content do you want to make going forward, whether it's long or short?
Yeah. I wanna connect with people in a real way. So I don't want to, like I could lean in with like I'm a 45-year-old guy with a six pack, or like I made $1 million on Wall Street. Like I don't want I want to lead with that stuff. Like it's just it's not. I mean, I'll lead with it if it can lead to a more like a real conversation. I feel really blessed that, like you said, many of these pillars to your language that I've discovered the learning pillar, I've discovered the spirituality pillar, I've discovered the fitness pillar. I don't know what the other pillars are in your framework. And I just feel really blessed that they've made my life much richer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I have a unique voice in it because, I'm an older guy. I'm a father. I've had traditional success, and I try to be a no BS guy. Like I'm not going to talk about something that I don't believe in, like just to get you to pay attention. So, for me, a lot of it has been, people my age, people that have, some of the success I had, they're kind of like still looking. They're like, well, like what's next, right? Like, what am I missing, right? I have a happy family. I have, money in the bank. People know me, and like, but I still don't feel like deeply, deeply satisfied. Maybe it's I don't have purpose or meaning. Maybe I'm very hard on myself in my own head, or maybe I don't have a capacity to experience joy. Right. And I can't promise you that I have the answers to many of those questions, but I have a perspective on these questions. And I know that perspective is helpful to some people. So that's really like the type of content that I want to create. And like I said, I want to do it in a way that is alive for me. That's why I just don't go on LinkedIn. Like it would be smart for me to spend time on LinkedIn. It's not alive for me. So just I'm not going to do it. And so I want it to be alive for me. I want it to lead to some more genuine and sincere connections. That's why I actually really like podcasting, right? It's just, there's so much emotional texture in podcasting. It's hard to fake. Like it'd be hard to fake for, an hour interview, just like give you all talking points, right? I mean, I'm sure politicians can do it, but I can. So that's what motivates me for the type of content that I want to do going forward.
And like you said, with the podcasting, for example, as a host, it's kind of like my job to orchestrate the conversation, like skip around questions, but really kind of react to what you're saying. So if you say something interesting, like right now, I'm saying something in response, not based on what my list is, but more like what you're feeling right now.
Exactly.
And you're a genuine person, and you want to be able to share that with people. And I definitely get that as a viewer of you. I definitely think TikTok's a great place for it. Have you done live streaming on there much?
I've done it a few times. The problem is, you laugh, Dustin. I have a 12-minute timer on TikTok, and my wife knows the password, and I don't. And so, and it's because as a consumer, it's
hours.
I freaking love hours, and I really need that. Like, I need that hard limit, and so I have to like get permission from my wife to do a live stream. I haven't gotten around to it, but I do plan. Like, especially now that I know that TikTok's probably not going to be banned, I'm going to invest more. Like for the past 7 months, it was kind of an experiment, and the experiment materialized very well, and it was fun. And so I'm going to like figure out a way to get in it. Like, what's the next level of commitment look like?
And for anyone watching this or listening in, there's a TikTok link for his TikTok down below if you want to go check it out.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
One thing I want to ask too, because you mentioned how like when you pitch yourself to other people, you're no longer that same guy at BlackRock. You're no longer the same guy at RadReads anymore. You've evolved as a person since then. And your life, you're going to have multiple evolutions like that. That's the polymathic style. And so one question I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
I would say just a genuine, sincere commitment to evolving, right? I really do view it as an evolution. Is it a creative evolution? Is it a spiritual evolution? Is it a learning evolution? Is it an academic evolution? Is it a professional evolution? Is it, like who am I as a person evolution? I think that like, so, you become a polymath, like the polymath is like the byproduct of a commitment to like always evolving.
And following that curiosity, I would add to that too. I feel like.
Absolutely.
I love your answer there, and that's why I asked that question, because everyone answers it differently. And
Hmm.
I, as a
What's
content
the
creator,
best answer you heard?
I I can't say I have a best answer, but
Hmm.
what I really like the idea of how these answers come together. So I really want to make like a compilation of them, like
Yeah.
every 25, so people can kind of get their own perspective by mixing together all the different ones.
Hmm.
And I think
I
that's kind
love
of the
it.
answer by mixing them together.
I love it. Yeah. So cool.
So we talked a lot about like introspection and stuff like that. And so I wanted to ask you here, have you faced your shadow, or how do you face your shadow?
Mm. A lot of therapy. I just got back from a psychedelic journey this
Mm,
past weekend. It's my second of those. So I'm not like heavy psychedelic person, but I journal a lot. I get coached by AI as well. So I guess I always notice. I try to pay attention to when I feel off balance, so like off centered. And so we were just at the mall earlier with my wife.
mhm,
And she was just like trying to like give me some bags and stuff. And I was just getting annoyed. And I'm like, what's happening right now?
mhm.
You didn't do anything wrong. I'm on vacation. I'm low stress. Stock market's up today. Like, kids are being angelic. Like, what happened? Like, what happened there? And so I might sit with that. Sometimes it's just like letting it pass through, like sitting with that feeling during meditation. Sometimes there's something like a little buried further back in. I'm like, oh, like I haven't talked to my dad in a while. It's like, maybe I'm feeling a little guilty for that, or maybe it could be as simple as like I didn't have a good night's sleep, right? And
Mhm.
so I just pay attention to that. I pay attention to that like stillness, that peace, and whenever I'm not at peace, which is not like all the time, but like it's a lot, like many instances throughout any given day, good days and bad days. I'm like, well, like what's happening here, Kay? Like,
Mhm.
and I know from a lot of talk therapy, I kind of know some of my things. Like I have like pretty low self-worth, which is why I'm so like achievement driven. I'm just like trying to always like overcompensate for this like low feeling of self-worth. I have a
Mm.
lot of like people pleasing tendencies, perfectionist tendencies. Like I'm very scared of like rejection. I'm very like I have like these abandonment fears. And so like I kind of like I know these things from therapy and talking to different coaches and things like that. So, like if someone ghosts me on a text, like it could like trigger like my abandonment, fears. And then I feel very like I have different like ways that I can like just kind of like reground myself, refine my center and be like, okay, like this is a Twitter stranger. Like no one's abandoning you. Like your family loves you. You're loved by people
Yeah.
like, so like but I didn't know how to do that before. And so then I would just get anxious and like I'd have like anxiety, or I would go drink to like kind of numb that uncomfortable feeling. So yeah, just like I pay, and that's where the meditation has helped a lot. Like I always say, it's like you could like say like looking at your brain or your thoughts, meditation, like without meditation, the glass is like very foggy and dusty. So it's kind of hard to see what's on the other side, but you just know something's happening. And
Yeah.
meditation is like putting Windex on it, and you're like, oh, that's what's happening on the other side. Doesn't mean you can change it, but you can see it for what it is. And that's
You
really
can
one of the
perceive it.
beauties of meditation. Yeah. And then be with it without having to fix it.
And the way I like to explain it is like the bridge between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind.
Yeah. Very well said.
I definitely like align with what you said there too. I think I have a lot of those same tendencies,
Yeah.
especially the perfectionism and the just like abandonment things and stuff like that. And what's really kind of conversely, in my perspective of you, is that you're one of the only prime examples I've ever seen that have built up all four pillars. If that makes
Mm.
sense:
Oh,
mind, body,
cool.
spirit, and emotions.
Yeah. Oh, well, emotions is the one that was the laggard for emotions really came around in the past 12 months.
I've been toying with the idea of maybe they're stacked. Like maybe you focus on the mind and body first, then you kind of do spirituality,
I
then
don't think it's
emotions.
stacked.
I don't, but like
I don't think it's
I see
stacked.
them all as individuals, and they all build
Yeah.
up individually too. So I
Yeah.
think we're on.
Oh, yeah. And I think in general, I'm going to be very, speaking very kind of like stereotypical language, but like it's definitely harder for men
Mm,
to get into the emotional side. Not always, but like in my experience, and for me, men, like
the
tough
societal
it
stuff.
out and don't. I was talking to a friend this morning, and he said, my dad's 78 years old. I've never seen him cry.
Mm. That's it's interesting. So what do you have coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
Yep. So, like I said, I'm in the process of writing a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of anchored around me making this like big, bold career pivot, but it's like everything that led up to it and everything that transpired after, right? And so it's going to touch on the themes that I write about often, like getting in touch with your emotions, sitting with those uncomfortable emotions. It's like different relation, like my relationship with money, my relationship with ambition. Like, what does it mean to like truly like live in alignment, right? Which I feel like I'm getting much closer at age 45 of like really living in alignment. So that's the thing I'm most excited about. I'm spending, two-ish hours a day writing on that. I don't know if I'm going to go a traditional publishing route or a self-published route. We'll just see. But right now, I'm just really enjoying the creative process of writing, and I think I've written like 4 solid chapters that they're not book ready, but like
Mm-hmm.
they communicate what the message that I want out there. So that's what I'm doing. I love my podcast. I'm approaching 100 episodes of my podcast, and just keep going. Like the thing about podcasts is it's just conversations. We pick a question, we talk about a question, and then that's it. It's very low prep. I can just show up as my whole self. I don't have to like prepare questions. Like if the question's the right question, and I decide, so then there's no prep. So that's exciting. I am going to continue to see where this goes with like this like khe.com and kind of like it's like a rebrand, a mini or macro rebrand of sorts. But I'm anytime you give me a new canvas, like it gives
Mm-hmm.
me, I get really excited. I like new
It's like catnip.
canvases to work on. And so I think that, having like a new website from scratch with no no constraints really. I mean, there's some constraints, but no like real constraints. It would be interesting to see where that takes me. Then, like I said, figuring out where like the good conversations are happening on social media. It's feeling a lot like short form video right now, but we shall see. And then as a hobby, but it's taking up a lot of my creative mind space, is continuing to learn how to make electronic music.
That's awesome. And I definitely think that that creative outlet needs to be refined every so often, and music is your current refinement.
Absolutely. I'm super stoked.
I definitely have a link to the SoundCloud if anyone wants to do it.
Yeah.
I was listening to one of your songs while I was writing down somebody's questions too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so if people want to find you online, what are some of the places they can look for?
Yeah. So for now, you can always go to radreads.co, and so that's the hub for everything. Sign up for the email newsletter. I send that out every Saturday. I'm on all social media platforms, pretty active, although dwindling on Twitter. TikTok's most active. LinkedIn is ish. And the Examine Life podcast.
I love it. And so this is Kay He and Dustin PolyInnovator on the PolyMath Polycast. Thank you for being here.